Bluey is a well-known Aussie kids show that it's not only fun for kids, but also amazing for grown-ups, too. Which is why today I'm kicking off of the rankings with Season 1. Magic Xylophone is one iconic episode in this series, I must admit. Which is actually pretty self-explanatory, in my personal way of thinking, which in fact is why I am going to intend to play is this one, but it's not as good, so I'm placing this one in B tier. No two ways about it. This episode, I feel like, is very lacking in the quantity. You have Excitement and Bandit having to deal with a cat in his stomach is just pretty atrocious. So for that, I'm placing this one in B tier. A fun game gets turned into insanity within a matter of seconds, which of course I feel like is very hilarious. Which is why I am going to place this one. This is gonna be tricky to say, but I feel like that Keepy Uppy as an episode would be placed in A tier. This episode really brought things up to me for a bit, which is actually pretty intense, I must admit. This is actually quite an episode that I've never thought I would enjoy. Hey, at all. Also, I'm actually gonna place this one in B tier. Shadowlands, I felt like was pretty awkward for a certain bit, but overall it was not that bad. It was amazing to enjoy and to watch overall. Which is why I'm going to place this one in A tier. The Weekend, I feel like, is pretty unusual, considering it matches the pilot from before the series even began, which I don't even know how they even did that. It's like, wow. What is with this? It's like, put this one in B tier. Barbecue, I feel like, it's like a standard thing for the summer. Or as barbecues are a barbecue is my type of get together or gathering, which I can personally enjoy, and the episode really makes it stand out. So for that, I'm going to place this episode in S tier. Fruitbat is not exactly bad, but it's not exactly that good either. It's just that I don't know what to expect with this episode. Considering that we actually don't see much of other than dreams. So, which is why I'm going to have to think thoroughly on this one and have this episode placed in A tier. Horsey Ride, I feel like is a bit worse than anything I've ever seen before. Or so that would be, I don't know what to say about that one. And considering that it's just a bunch of absurdity, I'm actually going to place this one in C tier. Hotel, no, don't even get me started on this episode, considering it's just wow, what the heck is with this? I would not want to watch this one. It's one and done, so E tier. Bike, I don't even know how to express this one, and because I'm just not so sure about this episode being amazing, let alone the greatest of all time for season 1. And considering think that this episode is just wow. So, straight up D tier. Bob Bilby, I feel like just makes some sense. It's because, wow. Like, I actually don't know what to expect with this episode. I mean, friendship, having fun together is amazing, which is why it's going straight to B tier. Spy Game is actually a different story. Like, I feel like it's just a way that teaches the importance of teamwork and working together, which I think is a very important lesson for children to understand. And because this, even though there are some subtle jokes for grown-ups, so A tier. Takeaway, I feel like it's just something for a bottle episode. I did not expect that. Would not have expected a bottle episode for season 1, considering I think that this is actually like, wow, what is with this? It's considered so. It's going in B tier. Butterflies, don't get me started. It's considering that it introduces us to a horrible character, which I will not discuss the characters in this video, in any of the videos, because because the characters in the series deserve rankings of their own. But regardless, it's going to E tier because it is just flat out abysmal. Yoga Ball. Now, Yoga Ball is just something I've never expected before. I mean, it does teach you that you shouldn't have to be afraid to speak your mind, which I think can personally agree and relate to. So, it's going straight to A tier. It's just that good. No joke. Now, the episode Calypso, that's something. And because I'm not. Considering that this episode is what I consider amazing to look at, and considering that this episode is one thing, so it's going in B tier. The Doctor, I don't know what to say about this one. Like, good grief. I don't know what would have been changing. Let's just hope that some things in this world are not worthwhile. Well, considering that some things are just crazy, so 8. It's A tier. The Claw actually is crazy. Like, this game is actually crazy. I've never expected to say that this episode would be amazing, if not free reference to what life was like for grown-ups. So, put this in B tier. Markets, I feel like, is just crazy because all it does is symbolize Indy's lifestyle with her mother, which I feel like just doesn't make any sense in my opinion. Nor has it ever made sense in this world. Well, that people should that just because of dietary restrictions, they should be allowed to enjoy stuff. So I feel like it's C tier. Blue Mountains, I think, is just wow. I don't even know what to say about this episode. Like, good grief. Like, this episode is just wow. I don't even know what to say about it. Which is why it's going straight to, let's say, D tier. The Pool. Now, that's an episode worth talking about. Proving spontaneity is not always the best policy, as carrying the quote-unquote boring stuff Like, that is actually something. So, this episode is going straight into, hmm, let's, let's say S tier, because that's got good. The shops, I feel like, is pretty abysmal, unlike the previous episode where it teaches boring things are important. It's like this is something that I've never seen before, nor would I ever want to see every once in a while, so let's see, let me move this, but let me just fix up the tier list and put shops in D tier. Wagon Ride, I feel like, it's just weird. Like, this is actually insane. And so, like, like, this is just something. Like, this is good grief. I could just say that this episode. Let me think. There's not much to say about this episode, other than the fact that it's D tier. Taxi, I feel like, is just crazy, considering the sat nav is just funny. I mean, shops would be obviously E tier, considering it's just that bad. Like, oh my god. Like, I don't know what to say about this episode, considering it's just horrible. So let's put it in C tier. The beach, I don't know what to say other than that looks like something I would enjoy. And perhaps that's like, this game is one of a kind. Like, actually, this episode is one of a kind. Like, I've never seen anything like this before. So, A tier. Pirates. Now, that's somewhat self explanatory. Considering some episodes are just wow. Oh, considering. Good grief. Like, let's just say that this one is A tier. Grannies, I feel like, is pretty amazing. Like, when will some learn that when Bluey and Bingo are in their personas of Rita and Janet, it's just very comical. Like, okay, I just. Good grief. Let's put that in A tier. The Creek. Now, let me see. That one is. Good grief. Like, this episode is pretty crazy, considering would enjoy it. Considering adventure is amazing and should be encouraged. So, A tier. Fairies. I don't know what to say about that episode. It's just not as exciting as I thought. Considering it just looks weird. Or like, considering some stuff is just wow. And this episode really does not sit through for me, which is why this episode is going straight into C tier. Work, I feel like, is just a reference to how life is when it comes to everybody working like crazy. Considering I work like crazy at one job, I'm trying to make a lot of cash, but that's not the case, considering it's actually going to be C tier. Bumpy and the Wise Old Wolfhound. Now that's something worthwhile, because it proves that illness is inevitable. Well, and of course the way everybody comforts Bingo. Like, this one goes straight into, let's say, S tier. Trampoline. Now that's an episode I really don't know much, wouldn't expect much about. Good grief. Like, this episode gets straight into, let's say, C tier. The dump, I feel like, I don't know what to expect. Because, like, I don't know what to say. Because this episode is just amazing. Like, this episode is something, so let's say that this episode is C tier. Zoo. Now that's an episode I would not want to talk about, would not want to talk much about. Like, this episode is just crazy. Good grief. Good grief. This episode is just not for me. Which is why I'm placing this one D tier. Backpackers, I feel like is just crazy considering the parents are ending up being crazy, especially with the character, with how Jeremy gets hit. So this one goes D tier. The adventure is quite an amazing series. Actually, it's an amazing episode because I feel like it's very cinematic. It's like it's pushing the camera where I feel like it's gone for a very cinematic feel throughout much of the episode, although, with the exception of being normal a few times of having to go normal. Well, for a while. Like this episode is really amazing. And considering that this is actually one episode I might be able to enjoy, because this episode I feel like is just really cool. Like this will actually work out for me very cinematically, which is why this one I feel like is S tier. Copycat. Now that's a way to say that, like, let's just say that it proves that when something dies, that's out of your hands, as death is inevitable. Which is, I'm placing that in A tier. The sleepover, no, vibe. It's always fun when we get to see, like, this actually works out for me because I like this episode. Plus, Bingo's introduction as her husband persona really gets me every time I watch this episode. Vibe. This is very funny. So, let's say A tier. Early baby. That's something I don't know what to say and talk about. Oh, because this episode is crazy. Oh my god, this episode is amazing. Actually, not that good, considering it's just a bickering story with contrasting stories, so B tier. Okay, mums and dads. That I don't know what to expect with this episode. I just feel like it's not as good, considering it's just probably comes with Indy and Rusty, which is why, let's say D tier. Hide and seek, I feel like it's just not as good. And so let's look. So I think it's better to look at a lot of different things in this adventure. But this one is just crazy. So let's say D tier. Camping, I feel like, just adds a lot of characteristics to the episode. Considering friendship is brief sometimes, as in time with friends and loved ones is brief. Like, I actually like this episode. So let's say that this one is A tier. Mount Mom and Dad. That's actually, like, I don't know what to say about this episode. It just doesn't seem like much of a fan favorite, which I personally, after watching this episode, I do not enjoy. So let's say E tier. Kids, I feel like, just proves that just actually, despite teaching that parents should not pick favorites, parents favoring one kid is common. Considering it's just wow, what the heck is this? I'm placing this in E tier as well. Chicken Rat, I feel like, is just wow, what the heck is this? This is a horror. This is one not so horrible episode, but it's not exactly one I'm crazy about. It's just wow. So let's say that this episode, actually not S tier, because let's say B tier. Neighbors, I feel like, is just wow. Considering that this episode is wow, what is this? Considering I've never would not enjoy anything like this, especially with rowdy neighbors. So let's say C tier. Teasing, that's a different story, as I don't even know what to say about this episode. It's just like, I don't know what to say. It's just not as good. It's so... Actually, it's better, so let's say B tier. Asparagus, I feel like, is just wow. A bunch of... every... Bluey, actually, Bingo, Chili, and Bandit end up turning into animals thanks to Bluey. But she eventually learns the importance of etiquette, which I think is a good lesson. So let's say... I'm gonna say that's A tier. Sean, I feel like, is just wow. What the heck is with this character? Actually, what's with this episode? That's what I meant to say, considering that this episode is pretty horrible. Well, and I do not think I would want to watch this episode for a long time, considering how gross this episode was and horrible. So let's just say that this one... Let me think. Let's see. D tier, E tier. Daddy Put Down, I feel like is amazing, considering that Bandit does his best with the girls, while Chili is at a baby shower, which I'm not gonna explain what that is, because it's just not worth mentioning. So let's just put this in S tier. And last but not least, Veranda Santa. A classic Christmas episode that depicts Christmas in other countries, but not in Australia, which is quite an amazing thing. Even though Bluey does get a little bit aggrieved about Socks biting her, she still makes up for it. Which I think is a good thing to teach kids, that presents are not the reason to be nice to people, but that you should be because it's the right way to act. And there's no replacing that type of lesson in this world. That's for sure. So let's just this episode I feel like is just straight up amazing to watch. That's considering how very few episodes to me are that amazing. Which is why I'm actually gonna say that this episode, I feel like, in my opinion, is just straight up in S tier. Thanks for watching this Bluey Season 1 ranking. And subscribe. Be sure to like and subscribe so you see more videos like this.